Then me and Bahar and Peter were transferred to a better prison, and the three of us lived together and coexisted in a place, in a cell we called the shoebox, because it was so small we couldn't stand at the same time. We were then upgraded, and we were kept with 15 prisoners, the senior prisoners in Egypt. The head of the former head of the parliament is on your left, the former prime minister is on your right, and the head of the supreme guy, the Muslim Brotherhood, is in front of you. So it was a lot of exclusive material that we gathered.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Yvonne Hunter, and I'm the head of programming for the Appel Salon here at the Toronto Public Library. It is my great honor this evening to welcome Mohamed Fahmy, who was pardoned and released from Egypt's notorious Tora prison on September 11th, following 2 trials and an initial sentence of 7 years. As former bureau chief for Al Jazeera International in Egypt, Mr. Fahmy captured world attention when he was arrested in December 2013. He was incarcerated for over 400 days, including a month in solitary, alongside ISIS terrorists and some of the most hardened jihadists in the Middle East. The Egyptian government charged Mr. Fahmy with conspiring with the Muslim Brotherhood and fabricating news to serve the fundamentalist group's agenda. In response, Egypt faced an international outcry from groups ranging from human rights and press freedom organizations to the United Nations, the European Union, and Barack Obama. I want to thank Mr. Fahmy for coming. I would like to thank Michelle Shepard, the national security reporter at the Toronto Star, who has just returned from Turkey and will interview Mohamed on stage. And I want to publicly acknowledge one person who helped to make this happen, working with me before Mr. Fahmy's release, and that is Natalie Turvey of the Canadian Journalism Foundation, and she's right here. And now I'd like to welcome our city librarian, Vickery Bowles, for opening remarks on behalf of the library.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Bram and Bluma Appel Salon at the Toronto Public Library. There are many reasons a public library card is important, but near the top of the list is the fact that the public library has been a democratizing force in the modern world, supporting literacy and a literate population, free and open access to a diversity of information and ideas, freedom of speech, intellectual freedom, and protection of privacy. And today, we are seeing more and more challenges to these democratic principles and values throughout the world. Civic engagement and discourse is more important than ever. Toronto Public Library has established itself as the place for public discourse, discussion, and debate in this city. And what could be better for a discussion about freedom of speech, justice, and the role of the press in a democratic society than to have our very own special guest, Mohamed Fahmy, here tonight, being interviewed by one of our colleagues at the Toronto Star, national security reporter Michelle Shepard. Public libraries achieve much of what they do through collaborations and partnerships, and this is certainly true about tonight's event. Our thanks to the Canadian Journalism Foundation and the Toronto Star for working with the Toronto Public Library to make this event happen. And what a special event we're in for tonight. I'm absolutely thrilled that we have the opportunity to hear from Mr. Fahmy from within the walls of a public library. And now it's my distinct pleasure to introduce John Cruikshank, publisher of the Toronto Star and chair of the Canadian Journalism Foundation.
Thanks, Vickery. We treasure so much what you do at the public library. It's been so important in this job that we all do in trying to keep open the public space. So I'm so glad everybody's here to enjoy this, what will be a very special evening. On behalf of the Canadian Journalism Foundation, thank you to the Toronto Public Library for this partnership and for hosting us tonight. And if any of you would like to join tonight's conversation on Twitter, you can use the hashtag #Fahmy, F-A-H-M-Y, okay? Let's make this global, right from the start. All right? The Canadian Journalism Foundation mandate is to promote and enhance excellence in journalism, and we do that in a variety of ways, and one of them is through our public speaker series of J-Talks, which explore the ongoing challenges shaping journalism at home and abroad. This series wouldn't be possible without BMO Financial Group, our J-Talk series sponsor, and CNW Group, our in-kind sponsor. The Toronto Star is really proud to be media partner for tonight. And I'm enormously proud of the work that the Toronto Star family did in our part in helping to bring Mohamed Fahmy home. In a moment, I'm going to acknowledge Michelle Shepard, but let me also thank Olivia Ward for the extraordinary and impassioned work that she did over a prolonged period to try and make this happen. So I'm delighted to introduce my friend, the courageous and unstoppable Shep, who is with us tonight. Michelle is the Toronto Star's national security reporter and an author and a filmmaker in her own right. Her coverage of terrorism and civil rights has taken her to the hot spots around the world. I tell you, I have anxiety anytime she buys a plane ticket, because I know she's going to go on, another trip to Somalia, to Yemen, to Pakistan, and of course to Guantanamo Bay. She's the author of Decade of Fear, Reporting from Terrorism's Gray Zone, and Guantanamo's Child, which has recently been turned into a documentary that she co-directed and which premiered at this year's Toronto International Film Festival. We talk about being on every media, on every medium at the Star these days. Michelle is really doing that in ways that nobody else can. Joining Michelle on stage is, of course, our guest, who we're honored to have here tonight, Mohamed Fahmy. Now, Mohamed is an award-winning Egyptian-Canadian journalist and author. And he's had an extraordinary career covering some of the defining events that really have shaped our world today. During a multi-decade career, and I don't believe that when I see him, during a multi-decade career, he's reported for the LA Times, the New York Times, Dubai TV, Al Hurra, and CNN. In addition, he spent 2 years working for the International Red Cross. As you know, as the Egyptian bureau chief of Al Jazeera International, he was arrested in December 2013 and incarcerated for over 400 days, including a month in solitary. Now, I'm going to let Michelle get the rest of the story, but just to let you know that Mohamed is about to take up a new teaching position at the University of British Columbia, and he is chair of the Fahmy Foundation, which advocates for imprisoned journalists worldwide. An extraordinary mandate and an extraordinary venture. So we all are thrilled that he's joining us for this talk in Toronto tonight. Please join me in welcoming Michelle Shepard and Mohamed Fahmy to the stage. Go, guys.
Good? There. Thanks. It's cute. No, you sit down. Thank you very much. And thank you, John, for the very nice opening remarks. I'm very proud of your hashtag and the number sign. Very proud of that. Just to give you an idea of tonight's format, I will be looking at my phone. I'm not checking Twitter. I'm just watching the time. But please do tweet. We will have a conversation for about 45 minutes to an hour, and then we'll open up the floor for another 30 minutes for your questions. So if you have questions throughout the night, please jot them down, remember them, so you can come to the microphone here. It's a great pleasure for me to be asked to do this, to meet Mohamed. Tonight is the first time that we actually met, but we have many colleagues in common, including Peter, who he was detained with for some of the time, who I'd reported with in Somalia. It was also, I've been teasing him since we came in, because when we walked in, there was a lineup, and people started cheering. And it was really beautiful, and it was a great moment. And I know that tickets sold out within 30 minutes. And I was laughing at him. I said, when do you ever get this reception as a journalist? I mean, like, you're a rock star here. I think it says a lot about Muhammad, about his case, but it also says a lot about journalism. And it's wonderful to see people do care about free press, free speech. And so thank you all very much for caring about that. And just give yourselves an applause. And I think that's a good place probably to start tonight's discussion. So much of this case was about the social advocacy to get you out. A lot on Twitter, which was the hashtags that started journalism's not a crime and free AJ staff. How much of that did you know about when you were in prison, and what kind of impact did that have on you?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me tonight. I'm so humbled, and it's such a great feeling to arrive and see this sort of reception. In terms of the social media, it was definitely instrumental in keeping our plight alive and our story across the world. And we're thankful to Al Jazeera for starting the Free AJ Staff campaign. We got more than 41 million people supporting it and circulating it, and 786 million impressions on Twitter in 1 month. So it kept our story alive. In prison, we weren't really sure what was happening outside. We were getting snippets of news from my wife, who was in the front row here, and others who were just giving us an idea. But when I just was released on bail and I had the chance to surf the net again, I was just baffled at the unprecedented unity and support from all over the world by the NGOs and the journalists and the ordinary people across the globe who had no idea who I was, but they felt the urgency of supporting our cause, because it was very obvious that this case was a real travesty to justice. And thanks to all the journalists and all of you, I am here today.
But how much impact do you think that had? And I don't ask that cynically. I mean, we were among the ones that, in the Toronto Star, we taped our mouths and we had a picture of that. But sometimes I wonder how much impact it actually has in your release. It makes us feel good when we're doing it. It's obviously important to spread the story. But do you think it played into your eventual release?
Oh, I think it did. I think my release was a result of a collective approach. You have to have the parallel strategies, a good legal team, a good PR approach, a good social media approach that reminds your captors that this is not going to go away. And that, and of course, all this counts for something. And at the end, I think the Egyptian government had enough of this guy, his colleagues, and, wanted to get rid of him. And I think that's, part of the reason. I think everybody should, if I would thank everyone here, we would be here till Christmas, but I do believe that every tweet, every rally, every petition made a difference at the end of the day.
Okay, so let's go back to where it all began. And I assume most people have a general understanding of the story, but take us back to that day when you were arrested. You're in a hotel room with your colleagues. Describe as much as you can remember about what happened and what you were thinking at that time.
Yeah, well, I remember it like it happened yesterday. So, on December 24th, Egypt had announced that the Muslim Brotherhood are now a terrorist group. And the last story I reported on air as breaking news for about half an hour was that specific announcement that they have been designated as terrorists, and with a specific law that explained that anyone who supports them, promotes their work, participates in their rallies will be considered a terrorist. And me and Peter were, covering the story for 2 days, nonstop. And then suddenly, 3 days later, that door knock came. And I looked through the hole, and it was a waiter. So you open the door, and suddenly you have a dozen officers barging into your office space, makeshift office. We were working in the Marriott, basically.
And just stop you there for one moment, just for people who might not know. Your bureau was actually in the Marriott, and describe the colleagues that you were with.
Yeah, the bureau was set up before I arrived as bureau chief. Al Jazeera had set shop there, and my team was a local Egyptian staff and foreign reporters that were roving in and out, like you do. And we were doing what everybody does. We're reporting the story from both sides. And in Egypt there is the Arabic Al Jazeera Mubashir, which is specialized in covering Egypt's projects, and the English, which I was running. So that they arrested us, me and Peter, but as soon as I opened the door, there was a video camera, and a flash photographer, and he was just going at it. They were pretty much setting the scene, and they ran it on national TV. So basically, before we even arrived or were investigated, we were branded as terrorists and people who conspired with the Muslim Brotherhood. So it was surreal, and we had to go through this whole interrogation, and I was shocked when we were accused of conspiring with the Muslim Brotherhood, fabricating news to serve their agenda and portray Egypt in a state of civil war and operating without licenses and so on. So it was really a surreal situation.
And from the hotel room you got taken, were you separated? Were you brought together to a cell? What happened in the next couple weeks at that? Like, did you know what was going on at that time, or how long did it take you to figure out, oh boy?
Yeah. No, I mean, at first we were taken to a police station overnight, and then me and Peter and Bahar were taken to the prosecutor, the state prosecutor, for interrogation. And I was immediately branded as the ringleader of this terrorist group, and for me, it sounded like a joke. I mean, when the prosecutor was asking me questions, I was telling him, "Are you serious? I mean, are you sure it's me you're talking about here?" And it started to hit me that we're in trouble when I immediately was transferred to the Scorpion maximum security prison. And I walked into the wing, and I found Mohammed al-Zawahiri, the brother of the Al-Qaeda leader, the Muslim Brotherhood presidential team, hardened extremists that just came in from Syria and Libya to try and topple the Egyptian regime. So then you get a shock. You're like, what am I doing here, basically? Right. And for the first 15 days, they were basically renewing our detention. And you'd think this is going to end tomorrow, this is all a big mistake, but then the big crisis surfaced when we were actually referred to court a month later.
And tell me about that. What happened that day in court?
Well, a lot of people have seen the court. It was, we were having almost a press conference every time we went to court. There was like the press, and you could see them from the cage. Later on, they changed the cage because of me, I think, because I have such a big mouth, but to a soundproof cage, and where you couldn't talk. They were showing us a photo of me with Mohamed Morsi, the former president, in the palace, and Zawahiri, whom I've interviewed, and just photos of Peter's family vacation, photos and reports that you'll find on anyone's camera. And I was shocked. I kept telling the judge, the photo you're showing is called an exclusive. I mean, I'm very proud of what you're showing, thank you very much, but this is not why is this a crime, Right. So it was surreal, it was tough, there was issues that complicated our situation throughout the case, but nothing that would entail a terrorism case of any sort.
And all this material that they had been seized from your
oh yeah,
hotel room.
It was everything in that office was evidence against me, and it's also again a joke because it's computers and laptops, and we were talking about this in the back about the Final Cut.
Yeah, there's a editing software called Final Cut Pro, and that was part of the evidence against him, that he had that on that. And I said,
you have Final Cut.
You have Final Cut. And I joked the only, people that might think that is a crime is some editors who think it's outdated software, but certainly not that, yeah. So you were, I mean, it's so hard for so many of us to fathom, being held for over 400 days, 438 days. And it stayed in the news in part because it was such a roller coaster. You were convicted, you were sentenced, it was appealed, it just went up and down. Describe what was sort of your darkest time, when you just thought, this, Kafkaesque case is not going to end, and you lost hope.
Well, that 1 month I spent in solitary confinement was probably the toughest part of the whole ordeal. To describe the cell, it was, there was insects that I've never seen before, and I'd probably kill about 50 mosquitoes, and I'd still have to sleep in. There's a lot more, and it was dark, it was freezing. We were allowed only 2 blankets. I was sleeping on the floor, and I had a broken shoulder as well. So it was very challenging, to say the least. You have a toilet that doesn't flush, and it's a very tough situation. And my wife could only visit once every 2 weeks in the beginning. And there was a glass barrier, so you couldn't really hug or express your emotions as much, and your visits are monitored too. So it's a tough situation for anyone to handle, especially that you are in there with extremists who don't respect humanity, human rights, press freedoms, or anything that we live for. Yeah. So I know that a lot of you here are probably asking yourself how you would have handled the situation, and it's only a normal feeling. And I just want to say that I do feel like I'm a stronger person now after prison, and I believe that a lot of us go through life without testing the limits, our limits. Me and you have probably been on the field, and we've tested these limits, and sometimes with all the conflict zones that we covered. But in that cell, I again tested my limits, and I think I've survived for two specific reasons. One, that I was able to align my spiritual being and my mental being and my physical being by, jogging on the spot, even though I wasn't allowed to go out for 1 month out of my cell for a month. It's a very small cell. Just trying to read any of the material that we were allowed to get, it was sometimes you get a newspaper in. And so keeping that, and also the media, knowing that the media was covering our story and kept our story alive is what empowered me behind bars, knowing that so many people out there fighting for us, and it made me feel like it's not just about me anymore, it's about a bigger cause, and I think me and my colleagues really believed in that, and that's what kept us going. And even in solitary confinement, it slipped through the concrete walls, this news that was happening outside, somehow, through a guard, through the grapevine, and it got to me inside, and I was just uplifted, and it helped me a lot.
And what period were you in solitary? Was it at the beginning of 2014?
Yeah, right between January and February 3rd, before the case got referred. Then me and Baher and Peter were transferred to a better prison, and the three of us lived together and coexisted in a cell we called the shoebox, because it was so small we couldn't stand at the same time very comfortably. Yeah, it was tough, but we were then upgraded, and we were kept with 15 prisoners, the senior prisoners in Egypt. The head of the former head of the parliament is on your left, the former prime minister is on your right, and the head of the supreme guy, the Muslim Brotherhood, is in front of you. So it was a lot of exclusive material that we gathered.
You just stole my next joke, because I was going to say, in a perverse way.
It is.
And we were, again, joking about this earlier. I mean, that was the best exclusives you could ever have. You had access to all the people that you've been trying to talk to. And tell us about what you did with that, because you guys actually had a bit of a journalism effort within the walls of the prison.
Yeah. So to stay alive and to basically entertain ourselves as well, every night at 8 o'clock, me and Baher and Peter, we started this mock radio show where we invited every single prisoner. We're in solitary confinement or in the other cell, and we had a hatch in the door, so we'd ask them to come up to the hatch, and we would have a full-on show where we prepare for it all day, the same way we prepare for a TV show, and we would ask all the questions that we ever wanted to ask, and still play the devil's advocate, because you have...
Because there's bars between you.
Yeah, So we would ask, like, for example, you have the extremists, and you have the Muslim Brotherhood, and we would ask them questions and put them into these confrontational discussions, and they were very, very intense discussions, and it was really so intense to the point that sometimes it ended up with yelling. And you have a very intense crowd in there. There was one sheikh who was with Osama bin Laden back in Afghanistan, in Tora Bora, and he would tell me about how he blew up the Buddha statues, very proudly talk about it. And then you'd have others who were telling me, you journalists, you should be killed. And he would tell me that straight in my face, but there's the bars between us.
Right.
So, yeah. So this radio show kept us going. It was very important for our being, and something unbelievable happened, and I'm still shocked that it happened. The warden of the prison came up to me one day, and he's like, "You got to stop the show, and if you don't, I'm going to punish you." So I was like, "Sir, even in prison, you're taking us off air, and give us a break. I mean, we're not discussing the secrets of the nuclear weapon. I mean, this is just a little bit to keep us breathing, But we did have to go off air in prison. So.
They pulled you off there. And I know this is a huge question, but in a succinct way, what types of insights did you get from those prisoners at that time? Because so much of what you were facing really is what today, one of the most important issues and governments are grappling with.
Yeah, I mean, what we've revealed in prison or witnessed is a mirror image of what's happening in Egypt and the region in many ways. You do see the difference between different ideologies of extremists and others who are more moderate. And you also have realized the radicalization that happens. And, you know, radicalization happens in prisons all over the world. We know the head of ISIS, Baghdadi, was in Camp Bucca in prison in Iraq, where I was back then when I visited. But to see it in front of you happening every day and see those 19-year-olds who were brought into prison because they're in a protest. And now they're sitting getting these lessons from hardened extremists and see their beard is growing and their ideology is changing and rhetoric is becoming more aggressive. That's what really angered me at many times. I've also interviewed some of the senior Muslim Brotherhood leaders, and one of them, he was an aide to Morsi, informed me about his visit to Obama several months before they were ousted. And he was telling me how he did a slight mistake by asking Obama to give him advice about what he called democratic control of the armed forces. And according to him, when he landed back in Egypt, a general from the military told him, so you're going all the way there to ask Obama for advice on how to control us, the military here? Shame on you. And, you know, so he was explaining to me how, at the time, General Sisi, the Minister of Defense, who's the president now, was also very angry at him. So these are just some of the points that we're revealing, and it was interesting to hear it from them.
Were you able to take notes and record this as you were in there?
Some of it, I took some notes, and Marwa was my voice outside, my wife.
Right.
I was able to smuggle in the family visits, and I would say this now, I'm more free to talk through her. She was my voice. She became an activist, an ambassador. She was everything. She meant everything to me. And she was also bringing in a lot of the reporting that was happening outside, hidden in the food trays. So every week or 2 weeks, she would bring in rice and fish, and under that, there would be a whole stack of papers of stuff that you were working on and others. So that was my eye to the world, what was happening. So the prison situation was very intense, and there was one part that really bothered me. And you know, I was in and out of different 3 prisons, and during the time when Steven Sotloff and James Foley were killed by ISIS, and even the Charlie Hebdo, these extremists were celebrating inside, and it really angered me because, you know, this so-called war on terror that is being used now by many governments across the world as a license to kill or clamp down on our civil liberties is being celebrated inside prison by these people who witness how we are suffering outside due to what they're doing. So, you know, I'm very concerned and that we are now witnessing probably the worst phase of suppression of the press and lack of human rights in a generation. And it bothers me because I've seen at firsthand what it does to me and others, and I've seen how the people we're supposed to be, fighting are using it and celebrating it. We're giving them victories.
Right, and you're seeing that. You were seeing that obviously in Egypt. Are you seeing that at home as well, or in other European countries in terms of what laws are being brought in? And again, another huge topic, I know, but does that extend beyond the Middle East? Oh
yeah, it does, because, you know, I heard about C-51 when I was in prison, and I was very, very concerned about that. And the law in Australia that was passed allowing access to metadata and without any protection to journalists and what they do. And there's different laws across the world now that concern me. The Egyptian terrorism law as well, that was initiated recently, that states if you as a journalist report a terrorist operation with numbers that differ from what the military is stating, you are liable to pay $25,000 to $50,000 as a punishment, and maybe your license would be revoked, you know. And we're seeing what's happening in Qatar as well. The Qatar, they've issued this new law, cybercrime law, that if they think a site is a danger to national security, they will punish you and the owner of the site without actually explaining what that means.
Right.
So all these governments across the world, of course, there's a terrorism wave that's happening, an unprecedented terrorist wave that we see, but there has to be other ways or a balance between, the security aspect and, the rights, the civil liberties rights, in order to promote true democracy as well. So this is a challenge that we all have to fight for and stand up for. And today is it's the International Day to End Impunity for crimes against journalists. And Mr. Ban Ki-moon, the head of the UN, stated that 700 journalists have been killed in a decade. And the Committee to Protect Journalists, who have supported me and my team throughout this ordeal, has also stated that so far, there's 45 journalists that have been killed just this year, and 200 who remain behind bars across the world. So there's a lot of work to be done, and I believe that we all should be unified behind this cause.
And your case was obviously on bogus material and about silencing journalists. I think one of my favorite, and I use that for lack of a better term, phrases was that your team had been brought together by the devil. Yeah. That had been one of them. I don't know how you have a defense against that. But, we've already talked about Final Cut Pro, but there was nuances in your case as well, in terms of Al Jazeera, its presence in Egypt. And you've said before that you believed it was partly you were caught in the middle of a fight between Qatar and Egypt. Tell us what you mean by that.
Well, throughout the case, this case has two aspects to it. Of course, the aspect of freedom of expression, but there's also a political aspect to it. And although our case did get good coverage, a lot of the context has not been analyzed because it happened during the rise of ISIS and the conflict in Ukraine and the airplanes that have crashed. I believe there's a political aspect of it all. It's a sort of a vendetta between Egypt and Qatar, the owner of Al Jazeera, that has contributed to this situation. And for example, the lawyer that Al Jazeera hired to defend Peter Mbaher, he turned against them in court. And me, of course, I had my own lawyer, and he told the judge that Al Jazeera sued Egypt against his advice a month before the verdict. And I also had written the network telling them, don't do that. If you want to sue Egypt, that's your business, but wait till we're out. And they sued Egypt for canceling their broadcast license. So that's just one example of the political ping pong that was going on between the two countries before our arrest, during our arrest, and it continues today. So there is a lot of politics involved, and we were pawns, I believe, in this case as well.
And why did Peter Mbaher have a lawyer, but you didn't at that time?
No, I wasn't convinced with this lawyer, and obviously my fears were in place because he turned against them in court. And he even went on 4 TV channels and started defaming us, his defendants, which is unethically, I can't even remember in history that it happened. And I got my own legal team at the time, who I believed were more efficient. And thankfully they didn't turn against me. Right. But that's an example of why I've had my reservations against the way Al Jazeera handled this case. But also, there is the Riyadh Agreement as well. And the Riyadh Agreement is a manifestation of all this political mess. And Mr. Robert Fisk had reported and stated that this sentence and case is a proxy because you have Saudi Arabia, Egypt, UAE, as one coalition who had designated the Muslim Brotherhood as terrorists, and you have Qatar and Turkey, on the other hand, who don't consider the Muslim Brotherhood as terrorists.
Right.
And this Riyadh Agreement was finally signed and was brokered by the late King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia, who basically, the agreement was signed by Sheikh Tamim, and part of this agreement was that Al Jazeera would contain their hypercritical programming on the Arabic channels of the region.
Right.
And there were other stipulations regarding to Qatar harboring Muslim Brotherhood fugitives and so on. But, there is a difference between the Arabic and the English, and that's why I joined the English network. I do differentiate completely between the channel that was the Al Jazeera Arabic channel that was specialized in covering Egypt, and the English channel. The English channel, I believe, had a very professional line, and I know that our reports that came out of my bureau were balanced, well-sourced, and flawless, to say the least.
If you don't say so yourself. And we'll go back to that distinction, because it's very, very important. But I watched you on, I think it was your first day out in Egypt, and you were on BBC's Hard Talk. Somewhere that you said you always wanted to go, that when you were detained, that and the Toronto Library, of course, were the two places that you wanted to come to. And the host there, and I can't do this justice, but he was giving you a hard time. He called you extraordinarily naive in agreeing to take this job. And I think a lot of people don't realize you'd only been with Al Jazeera for 3 months before this happened. How did you respond when he said that? His point being that you should have known that Al Jazeera had this reputation in Egypt. You should have prepared for that. You should have asked tougher questions, and you jumped into the job without doing your due diligence, was essentially what he was saying.
Yeah. Well, I replied to him, and I told him it is extremely naive to think that this case is just about freedom of expression, and that there are really complicated political issues behind this case that him or me or you would have a very hard time grasping unless your network would be more transparent with you. So I, again, took this job, and I gave conditions to Al Jazeera to keep me away from their Egyptian Mubashir channel. One, because it was officially shut by a court order in Egypt, placing it as, or labeling as, a bias to the Muslim Brotherhood and a national security threat.
And you knew that going in, that it
I
happened.
knew that they had shut it, but I didn't know the reasons, but I knew that it was shut. I found out later on why. But the point is that I made the differentiation. I still do, and I believe some of the best journalists work in Al Jazeera English, but the Egyptian channel, which is now, has been shut, my conditions were keep me away from this channel. We do our own news gathering, our own sourcing, our own booking, and do you have licenses for the English channel? The reply was, we have licenses for the English channel, concentrate on your editorial side. As bureau chief, you trust your teams abroad and your team in Doha, but unfortunately I found out in court that even Al Jazeera English's license was revoked. And that was part of the anger I had towards Al Jazeera. And of course, not having your license doesn't entail a terrorism case, you know. And in court, part of our strategy became telling the judge to separate between the responsibilities of the journalist and the network, and that, again, my team had not fabricated, not conspired, and if there's anything related to licensing, Al Jazeera should be accountable for that. So these are the complicated aspects of it all, the English and the Arabic, and how Egypt at the end, the government realized that, you know what, this is all one toxic brand, and we've had it with this network. And I do have to say that, you know, Al Jazeera also had taken some of my material from English, dubbed it to Arabic, behind my back, and placed it on the banned Arabic channel.
And when did you find out that they had done that? Was it before you'd been detained or after?
I found out before I was detained, and I sent an email that's published on the internet, and I was telling my boss, if you continue to do this, it will come back to bite us. And he replied, and he said, I will remove it immediately. And they removed it. But again, I found out after the arrest that it had happened 6, 7 times.
Before you'd sent that
No. The first time I sent it is when I realized, and then after the arrest, I realized at the prosecutor's office that it has happened more, and I was clueless about it, because you don't go check the channel, the Arabic channel, every day before you sleep. And in other networks, it's okay to share content. You know, I've worked in CNN for 3 years, and BBC as freelance, and this happens. But when the government tells you that this one is shut, you respect it.
And I'll just mention that you have a lawsuit now for $100 million against Al Jazeera, and Al Jazeera does deny the claims, and so I expect you look forward to the day in court when that'll all get.
Yeah, I don't like to speak much about the case to respect the judiciary here. But you know, my issues with Al Jazeera is that after I have brought up all these issues constructively, they continued to portray this epic negligence, as I called it in the media, and deliberate negligence, misrepresentations that gave my captors more ammunition and it made my situation much harder to get a lawyer that turns against us and sue the country while we're in the cage and operate without licenses. And, so, the lawsuit was the last option. And I hope, that we remain as civilized as possible.
Right. I remember when it was launched, and I remember thinking at the time, not knowing the backstory to that, is he doing this as a strategy to separate himself in the eyes of the court? Was the timing of announcing when the lawsuit important to you? I mean, did you worry that maybe that would complicate the case further rather than have a benefit?
It was hugely a game changer. I'll tell you why. Because suddenly all these TV channels in Egypt that were branding us as terrorists were inviting me to their channels. So I took that platform as an opportunity to defend myself and show the TV that the technical committee of video experts that saw our videos came back to the court and told the judge our reports are not fabricated. So I was able to start defending myself, but I was also able to give both sides of the story. I was criticizing Qatar and Al Jazeera and Egypt and the prosecution. So that was a platform that was very new for all of us. And I made as much use as possible to garner support. And there was a huge difference. And I think it made our case much clearer. Of course, the judge still sent us back to prison, but if you look at the sentences coming out of the Egyptian courts, because the Egyptian courts are now, what's happening in Egypt with the Muslim Brotherhood, it's almost like what's the McCarthyism in the 60s that I've only read about, but some of you here may have witnessed it. It's the eradication of anything Muslim Brotherhood, the books, the ideology, and they will go at any length to do that. And the courts were obviously retaliating to that, and unfortunately, we were placed in this frame. So I had to do something other than go up to the court and say, hey, I'm not a Muslim Brotherhood,
Well, we were joking earlier. Yeah. Journalists like to use dark humor, I think. But
we have to.
When you were saying that, you said to the judge, you look at our hotel bill. I mean, look at all the whiskey on the hotel bill. You think Muslim Brotherhood has a hotel bill? You did have a lot of moments in court where I think you said the judge at that even laughed.
Yeah, I was trying to break the ice with the judge. He was, he was wearing sunglasses throughout the whole trial, most of the trial. And I even told him, sir, can I see your eyes? And he laughed. And the situation was so superficial that sometimes, because Marwa is not, she's not veiled, so I would like her to sit in the front row so the judge could see her. And this was the extent of what we were trying to do to get the message through. This is how superficial it was. Right. And I did tell the judge that, there is alcohol on our bill, so do you think we're Muslim Brotherhood terrorists?
Right.
So
he laughed, but then he sentenced him.
And then, there was another ironic moment, is that I was kindly given the World Press Freedom Award by the CCPW here, and I received it when I was in court on the same day of the World Press Freedom Day on May 3rd. So again, I asked the judge to come out of the case and the cage, and I told him, "Sir, the world is watching. We are tired. We've been sleeping on the floor. Can you just get us out on bail?" And he just laughed about it, and he, told me, "Happy Press Freedom Day, and go back to your cage." Yeah.
Oh, it's good we're laughing about it now. I'm sure at that time it must have been, every time you left court, it must have been extremely
tough. It was tough.
But
I if you'd allow me to express, some of the books, later on throughout the ordeal, I was allowed books, and Marwa had brought me more than 100 books, and Peter, me, and Bahar were sharing them. And I read a book written by Viktor Frankl, and it's called, Man's Search for Meaning. And it's about his experience in the Holocaust and the Auschwitz. He is a neurologist, and he survived the Holocaust. And that book, reading it in prison, was so uplifting, because he is talking about this concept of tragic optimism and how to survive and say yes to life when you're facing, death and pain and injustice. And it kept me going, and it taught me basically to turn suffering into a human achievement, into something positive. And for me, that empowered me, and I realized that every tweet out there, and all of us, we are now turning it into an achievement, because you're telling these world leaders that if you continue to clamp down and kill journalists and imprison journalists, we're not going to stop. And the amount of support that we got is a manifestation of that. And I do live with this concept now every day in the morning when I wake up, especially that now I am also living with a permanent disability in my arm. I can't raise it more than that because of prison and an injury that was exacerbated in prison. So I live with this motto now, and this concept keeps me going, and I talk about it to my wife and others. It's about giving back, and this is why I started the Fahmy Foundation. While I was in prison, I registered with my lawyers, Gary Caroline and Joanna Gisselson, and my wife, and we're basically giving back and advocating for journalists behind bars and financing journalists behind bars, because you can get all the fan mail which supports you, but you need money to get you out of prison as well. And we just donated $3,000 to Ethiopian journalist Wubshet Tayi. He's again caught up in bogus terrorism charges. He's in prison, sentenced to 10 years. He's been there for 4 years. We're hoping to get him the money soon to his wife. And I'm in contact with families and lawyers of Raif Badawi in Saudi Arabia, who's serving 10 years and 1,000 flogs. And, Mohammed Al-Ajami, Qatari poet, who's serving 15 years for a poem, for criticizing the Qatari emir. Jason Rezian, the American journalist who's in Tehran, and I'm speaking with his brother, and his, again, for politics gone sour, and he's being used as a pawn, basically.
And so many of these names, probably people in the audience don't know, because so often it's local journalists that face, almost always it's local journalists that face the harshest punishment. In that vein, when Peter was released, Peter is Australian. He was released
January 2015, a year before I was.
How did you, it must have been bittersweet. You must have been happy for his release, but also thinking, why am I still here? I mean, what was that like?
I was extremely happy for Peter, and he's like a brother, so is Baher, but you also have emotional, mixed emotions. You're left behind, and at that time, I had renounced my Egyptian citizenship and advised to do that by the Egyptians and the Canadians to get out. And I did so, and the Canadian government here, they were basically telling me, what flight do you want to take back? And Marwa, my wife, quit her job. My mom sent me my bags, and I shaved, and I was getting ready to go home, literally. And we even reserved a press conference room here. And suddenly, Peter was sent back, and I was sent back to the retrial. So it was really, really tough. And I think that was the best time for Mr. Harper to go in with all his clout. Because I did believe in the beginning that bullhorn diplomacy was not the way to go, and that there should be a balance between quiet diplomacy and bullhorn diplomacy, but obviously that wasn't working. So this was the time to stand up and call the Egyptian president, who wouldn't have resisted this phone call, because Canada had pledged $60 million of taxpayers' money to Egypt. They had excellent bilateral relations. They were training their police. So it was, a challenging moment, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a huge issue, and one I think that has been debated for a long time. I remember it coming up during the Meher Arar affair when they talked about Canada's quiet diplomacy. And I think that term of bullhorn diplomacy is what John Baird said in your case, that was not required. Do you think there's a time in these cases where quiet diplomacy does work? And do you think that Canada was trying to do that? Or do you think it was just very, very quiet to the point of being silent?
Yeah, that's what my lawyer Amal Clooney said in one of her statements about.
I wasn't even ripping her off. I didn't know.
The quiet, non-existent diplomacy. But no, I do believe, and I'm working now on a charter of recommendations that I'm presenting to the new government. When I met Mr. Trudeau here 2 days before the elections, I'm submitting this document with my lawyers who are working on it and with Amnesty, about recommendations that stem from my experience for better protection of Canadian journalists abroad. I believe leader-to-leader intervention immediately upon the arrest is very important. Why? Because that time between the arrest and the referral to court, in our case it was 3 weeks or a bit more, is the time when the Egyptian president, other presidents can intervene and deport you before it goes to the clogged judicial system. So that's very important to do right there and then. And in Egypt and other countries, due to the political turmoil that's happening now in the region, any Canadian can be in my situation. And a lot of people get sort of swept in by mistake. And you need your president or your prime minister to make that call. And delegating your responsibilities or that to an ambassador who were kindly helping me and supporting me and trying their best may not do it. And so that's part of the charter that I'm working on. And just to mention here, there's a journalist in Turkey, Mohammed Rasul, and you just came back from there. You know the situation there is very tense. Mohammed Rasul works for Vice News, and he was arrested probably 60 days ago. I was still in prison when I read his story, and he's the best example of that. They released the 2 British reporters with him, but he's still in that phase where his case has not been referred to court. So any intervention from his government and NGOs across the world should be now to get him out.
Do you think there's a two-tiered system, though? Actually, before I get to that question, probably just to be fair, you have been very complimentary to the consular staff, to the ambassador in Egypt. There's to differentiate between the political level and those on the ground. Were you happy with some of the representation that you got at sort of a ground level?
I was, and the ambassadors, you know, they were visiting me, making sure, you know, that I'm okay. They got me magazines and maple syrup.
Please tell me no, really?
No, really, and I'm not saying this. I'm not saying this in a sarcastic way. I'm very, very serious. You know.
But this goes to our joke. We always.
I was not joking. I was serious. You know, and I do believe that.
Did you ask for it, or did they?
I asked for the maple syrup.
Oh, okay. All right.
But they got me the books, and they got me, but no pancakes. But they got me the books and some newspapers when I was allowed to have newspapers. But I did feel that the ambassadors were shackled by Ottawa's hyper-conservative approach. I did feel it. They wanted to do more, and again, in the issue of my arm, you know, they tried many times to get me out of the prison to a hospital, but it was too late when this happened. My family were able to make it happen, and there was a malunion in my shoulder, and so again, this is another example, the health issue. When you're in a prison like that, in a time that's so intense in Egypt and other places, you need to have that leader-to-leader intervention. And I did work for the International Committee of the Red Cross, and ironically, my job was the protection of political prisoners and extremists in Lebanon's prisons. So the tables turned, and my job before was to go to these cells physically and help these people inside and try to make sure they get a lawyer and their injuries are being watched. You know, and you know, now I didn't find the ICRC in Egypt's prisons. And this is another important issue about the importance of this NGO work, how important it is, this watchdog approach, to be able for these NGOs to have access to prisons, whether it's the ICRC or Human Rights Watch or Amnesty, because these organizations do a lot of good work.
Going back to the issue of being Canadian, do you feel that there is a two-tier system insofar as the situation would have been different if I had been detained than someone who was born in Egypt?
Oh, the media here tried to pull me into that conversation when I arrived a couple of days before the elections, and I don't think being Mohammed or Peter or Mary made a difference in this situation. I think it was such a complicated case with geopolitical aspects that were so rooted with the Muslim Brotherhood and Qatar in the picture that it was just a matter of that our leader did not understand the urgency of the situation, and that he delegated his work to others who were very qualified but did not have the sort of clout to deal directly with the Egyptian president.
And it did come out, I think right before the election, there was a story, Canadian press, where an unnamed source had said that Prime Minister Harper did call the president. I think that's the first that I had read of it. I know you've read that by your smile there. Did you get any more information about that?
Well, if we started the Harper Call Egypt campaign, Samantha Moncton and Cecilia Greason, and I thank them for that, and other friends of mine here, and the response from Ottawa was positive. The ambassador was trying to have face-to-face meetings rather than relying on faxes and emails. But it was shocking, and I wasn't sure this was the way to go when, for the first time, I hear about this phone call from an unnamed source in a Canadian paper 3 days before the elections when I get here. It was shocking because as a mother, my mother was always crying, and my wife, and I'm in prison. That sort of phone call would have probably been a life lying to us, even knowing that it's happened. And actually, you know, Mr. Tony Abbott, the Australian Prime Minister, had intervened publicly and met President Sisi in the UNGA and made it very public that and called him 2 times and 3 times as well to tell him, you know, get my citizen out. And this didn't happen in our case. So, I don't like finger pointing or anything like that, but I genuinely do want to make things happen for others who are behind bars. We have another Canadian Egyptian citizen, Mohamed Al-Attar, who's been in prison since 2007. He's Canadian Egyptian, and CSIS, our very intelligent community here, and they don't do this often, have acknowledged on TV that Mohamed Al-Attar's situation is questionable and that the espionage charges against him are, almost baseless. And he has been in prison since 2007, so it's been, almost, and he's sentenced to 15 years. So again, this charter I'm working about, because there's a system in Egypt that talks about a pardon when you do half your time and you've been in good conduct. So he's someone that I think we should give some attention to.
But again, going back to the issue of citizenship, and not trying to draw you into anything, but there's a case in point, and maybe this is our failing in the media, because I remember covering that case, and we haven't kept on it as we have with some other cases. But do you think that it does make a difference that somebody is detained in the country of their heritage? Our new Prime Minister has said a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian. You're recommending a charter for the new government. Will you address any aspects of the difficulties of someone who has dual citizenship? Do you think that plays any role?
I think in Egypt it plays a role, because they start viewing you as an Egyptian, and then there's issues
from Egypt's side.
From Egypt's side. But
from Canada, do you think?
I don't think it should be an issue in Canada, because again, the level of intervention is on a human rights aspect, first of all, and that's very important to make the differentiation. And then the Egyptian president comes in and tells you, here's a new law I just made for this case, the decree to deport foreigners abroad. And then Mr. Baird, with all respect to the work he's done on this case, he announced to a room full of press in Egypt that Canada was not going to put me on trial if I'm sent to Canada, which pretty much embarrassed the Egyptian government. Australians didn't do that. So what I'm just trying to say again in this charter is that there should be a better outreach with, for example, my lawyer Amal Clooney, when this law surfaced, she asked to come to Ottawa to meet with them and give them free advice, one of the best lawyers in the world, and they told her, no, we don't want you to come here. So, there's just these aspects that need to be addressed and put, it's just a recommendation from me, and I hope that Mr. Trudeau, who had, I had a good hour with him before the elections, and he was very supportive of what we want to do with the foundation, which is still at its infancy period. We haven't really developed it the way we want to. And again, the issue of protecting Canadians abroad.
And you had to give up your citizenship, your Egyptian citizenship in this case, which in the end maybe helped you, but it certainly didn't help you at the time. Are you going to try and get that back now?
I'm glad you asked this question. I was branded as a Canadian of convenience and an Egyptian of convenience.
Right.
I was like, guys, make
can't
up
be both.
your mind.
Yeah, that's right.
I came to this country with my family in the early 90s because we wanted to live a true democratic society and freedom of speech,
right,
and live that good life. And I'm a proud Canadian and a proud Egyptian. And I lived with these values throughout my career from day one when I left to the Iraq War in 2003, and it helped me maneuver and my feet was grounded on both sides of the world, and I'm very proud to be from both countries. But when somebody tells you, drop your citizenship, that really hurts. I mean, it's a very tough decision. It's pulling your heart out, basically. And my family felt it. I agreed to do it for them and to get out. And it was interesting when they came to tell me, take it, they're like, the nationality is in the heart, Mohammed. It's not a piece of paper. Sign it now and give us your fingerprints so we can get you out of prison. So what do you say? Okay, you agree.
Right.
But then they did a U-turn some way, and I don't have an answer until now, how that happened and why I wasn't deported when I was given assurances by both governments. And even Mr. Baird went on and he said it's an imminent release, and it was almost breaking news on CNN even and other stations. So it is very tough to have to drop your citizenship, and I think I will apply for it again in Egypt. I'm looking into the legal aspect of it all because it's almost unconstitutional the way it was done, and it's never been done before in Egypt's history. So I will fight to get my citizenship back. It's a matter of, and in hard talk, he asked me that question as well.
did, yeah.
I like doing these programs because it's always very heated. But he said, why would you do it if they sent you back to prison? Well, it's a matter of principle, 1. 2, I have extended family there. 3, I want to report anywhere in the Middle East in the near future, and I don't want anyone to tell me you're not welcome.
Yeah, there is some debate, though. There certainly was debate in Canada at some point about having dual citizenship. Should we require people to give up one citizenship? If that debate, I don't imagine that debate to be coming again, but if it did, how would you answer when people say you can't be loyal to 2 countries? Like, you have to choose.
I think that there are millions of immigrants here, and I think as humans, we have the intellectual capacity to carry our heritage and carry the heritage that we were molded into and respect the values that we appreciate from both constitutions. And, you know, when C-24 surfaced, I was in prison. I was like, oh, God, another law that's really unacceptable. And I asked the ambassador to bring me the literature, and I read it in prison. And I was very worried about, you know, okay, now they're going to take away my Canadian citizenship, you know. And so I think C-24 is very dangerous because you overpass the judiciary, and one minister decides on the fate of the person, and it defies due process. And very briefly, during my meeting with Mr. Trudeau, he was also not very happy with it. So that's a good sign.
There you go. We have our exclusive here on that. I'm just about to open it up to questions. Unfortunately, I still have all these to go, so if you don't have questions, I'll jump in, but I have a feeling people will. Just tell us about that day that you got released and where you found yourself.
No, I found out my wife was visiting me, and then she left, and I went back to my cell very down and out after a family visit. You know, you're not going to see them for a week or so, maybe 2. And I walked in, and we had a very small television set that only had 3 Egyptian channels, government-sponsored, of course. And my name was being announced. And I was shocked that I'd just been pardoned, and I couldn't believe it. I was dancing with Baher, and we were celebrating, and then the cops came, and they literally dropped us on the street with our prison garb, no money, no mobile phone, and after they left, another police unit came like, what are you guys doing here? You know, and, it was unbelievable. And, you know, Marwa showed up, my wife, and the media showed up, and it was just unbelievable. We couldn't believe it. It was a nightmare that was over, and it was a very tough, almost 2 years, and you become a changed man. You cannot go through this experience unless you're a changed man. And I live with that today, and you know, and coming back to Canada was just ecstatic. You know, touchdown on Thanksgiving, that was unbelievable. It was great, and we live every day like it's a new day, and we're just discovering how to be, calm and not worry. You know, it's a great feeling to be free, and I do believe we sometimes forget what freedom is about, and to be able to walk the streets and not be judged all the time for your gender and your religion and, you know, your ideas. So it's great to be here, say the least.
They dropped you off outside your high school, too, didn't they?
Yeah, outside the high school. Cairo American College, and the security guards, they had to shut the gates, and it was like another scene. So everything about this case
You can't script it, yeah.
You can't script it. Everything has so many first times, so many geopolitical aspects, and I believe that a lot of people can learn from this as a case study. Governments as well. And I did stop in London, and I met with the Foreign Office in London, and I spoke to them behind closed doors about a lot of these points I'm talking about, and the urgency of leadership intervention, and so on. I'm not just talking to the Canadian government, because at the moment, my colleagues, Peter Greste, Sue Turton, Rena Nedjes, Dominic Kane, Mohamed Fauzi, Anas, and they have not been pardoned. You know, they're free to travel. They're free. They're not behind bars. But I have been pardoned. So did Baher. And they are still not pardoned, and I believe their names should be cleared. And I said it on Egyptian TV as well, because now I'm welcome on Egyptian TV.
Right.
So there's an aspect about this case, again, how the media handled it, and it brings in so many complicated points.
Right.
But, it's really, really a point that we should all focus on. It's that these newly passed draconian laws in Canada and abroad, it could result that my story could be repeated again. Right. And that is why, it's very dangerous to allow anybody to tell journalists what to report on and what not. And again, the so-called war on terror that has become almost a license to murder and get away with it is unacceptable. And, we need to be unified behind this cause, I think.
And on that note, if you have a question, please make your way to the microphone here. And we only have 30 minutes because we did talk for the whole hour. I'm sorry. So if I could just ask you to keep your questions as short as possible, and to ask a question. And the microphone's right here. I'd like to come.
Good evening. My name is Mohammed. I'm also a journalist in Africa, the Middle East, and here. And like you, I was in solitary confinement. And I know what you are talking about. I was also in your country during Abdel Nasser's days. My question is, are you going to write a book about your experience in the near future? And since Western countries give a lot of support to countries like Egypt and Saudi Arabia, who are human rights violators, what your take will be on Western commitment to freedom of speech and to free press? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. I got the first part. I didn't get the second part.
I think
what will I do, or
no? What your take will be on Western commitment to freedom of speech and to freedom of the media?
Yeah. Thank you. First of all, it's when I meet somebody who had experienced some of what I've been through, it's very moving. And I am writing a book with Random House. Ms. Louise Dennis is the publisher and the executive producer. I'm very lucky to have her. And Ms. Amal Clooney is also writing the foreword for the book. And I feel very passionate about the book because there's so much context, again, needs to be revealed, and a lot of intricate details that have not been discussed in the media. No news, no 30-second newsreel is going to give justice to this story. And so the book is very important for me. What I will do, or what, at the moment I am lucky to have this platform and this momentum, and it won't last long considering there's a lot more happening in the world. So I am taking the opportunity to speak across different venues in North America and in Europe next week and in a couple of weeks. So this is what I can do for now. And with my foundation, again, I'm trying to do more by communicating directly with these governments through the contacts I have nurtured throughout my career and through this experience and the expertise that we have gained as a family and my lawyers as well. So I think there's a lot to be done, and in Egypt, the Middle East, and other countries, to be able to actually feel that you are doing what you are, what you plan to do. Thank you.
Next question.
I have a question. John Grayson and Tarek Loubani were two famous Canadians who were also imprisoned in Egypt, and I was wondering if your families and friends maybe worked with them on the campaign, media campaign for your release, and if you will maybe work with them for your foundation as well, or with their families and friends. Thanks.
Oh, I love these guys. John and Tarek had been detained for 50 days, and ironically, I was covering their story before I got arrested. And I was, talking about the cockroaches in the cell and, the bad conditions, and I ended up in the same prison You know, it's unbelievable for 438 days. But they stepped up with Cecilia Greason, John's sister, and they initiated the Harper Call Egypt campaign. And Farah Mawani is also here, and she helped a lot with that. So Tariq has done great work in Gaza. He's provided support to the people in Gaza after his experience, and it's my honor to continue to work with them on different projects, and they're good friends. So, they're great. Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Fahmy. My question for you is, do you plan to get back into journalism anytime soon?
Oh, I got into journalism because I love history and I love a challenge, and I do believe in that what we do does make a difference. I specifically, I'm pretty moved with investigative journalism because it becomes, it's like a doctor once you do a story and it actually makes sense. And there has been, you can probably count them, in your career, stories that have really made a difference. And one of them is the CNN story I did, where we uncovered an organized crime gang in Sinai who was smuggling people from Eritrea and the Sub-Saharan through Sinai to Israel. But they were, kidnapping these people halfway through or stealing their organs. And we did this story, and suddenly the story got so big that so much media came from all over the world to cover this story, and the military in Egypt got hold of the story, and they actually were able to bust this organized gang because of this one story we did for CNN Freedom Project. So that's one story that I'll always be proud of, and I think any journalism student who wants to go work in the Middle East should know that, jumping into a war zone right away might not be the best idea, but the best way to go with journalism is to actually go down and talk to real people. And so my passion for journalism is still there, and I think I will go back sooner or later, but not right away. I need to decompress and, live with my wife here and just relax for a while. But, of course I'm going to go back.
And just to let people know, you have a teaching position that you're going to as well.
Yeah, in UBC. I already started, and it's such an honor to be at UBC and share all these experiences with the students and learn from them as well. And they have some really intense questions sometimes. Please.
Thank you. My question touches on this point. I was just wondering what specifically you're teaching at UBC, and I asked the question because I'm wondering if your experiences and the experiences of other journalists that have happened in recent years may have swayed, young academics or young individuals who are interested in journalism, but fear for the international climate for your profession and what that might bring to them in the future if they wish to experience and to investigate these conflict zones.
Well, academics always and journalists have this line, and they're always criticizing each other. We know it better. You guys are not getting it right. But
we do know it better.
Right, we know it better. They know that. Right? But I'm lecturing on different topics: Middle East studies, history, geography, democratization. But I'm also going to be lecturing about journalism and actually what we do, the craft itself, and how it's changed on the ground. And one of the aspects I would like to always focus on is citizen journalism. I also want to discuss hostile environment. I do believe that any journalist who wants to get into a conflict zone, he should have good training in dealing with hostile environments. And you could be the best journalist in the world, but not have the social and linguistic skills, for example, and the expertise to handle conflict zones. And you need to be able to do that to survive and be able to report freely and safely and be able to maneuver and do the job the way you should do. So that's stuff that I want to talk about as well. And, I look forward to speaking there and explaining how it works on the ground, basically.
Do you think your foundation will get involved in that work too? Because I know that's certainly something we talk about in journalism all the time, about citizen journalists and the reliance on stringers in the field, but who don't have the hostile environment training courses or the insurance or the backing that we do at large.
Well, on my foundation's homepage, Fahmy Foundation, I've posted a defense handbook that was written by Reuters and other organizations and a team of legal lawyers. And it entails a little bit of the protection for journalists and ideas and the Human Rights Charter and all that. But in my foundation, again, it's in its infancy phase. I'm still also exploring ideas, and it's a very important subject, and I've seen. And I just want to point again to Steven Sotloff. God bless him and his family. He had visited me in Egypt, in my home, me and Marwa, before he went to Syria. And he asked to borrow my flak jacket. I couldn't give it to him because CNN, it was owned to CNN. But a lot of these freelancers, including Sotloff, they're not cowboys. They know what they're getting into, and he was studying the scene very well, and he was communicating with trusted people on the ground. But these freelancers really want to make a difference, and they want to, report these very tough stories. And I tell them again that when we go in with CNN or big networks, we go in with an army. We have, a security personnel that used to be in the military that tells you where to go and whatnot, and when to put on your flak jacket, and they have tracers on the car, and just protection and intelligence to protect you. And you have your producers, and you have your people. And so, freelancers who jump in to cover this story need to realize that, and the networks have a responsibility as well, not to, encourage this sort of approach. I do believe that's very important, and I would like to do more work on that.
Not making light of the subject, but I was catching John's eye because we certainly don't have those people working at the Star when we go in, but please. Networks are different, you have equipment. Next question.
Something a bit more mundane. How can one support the foundation and stay informed if one is not online?
Thank you for this question, and thank you for coming today. There's a page on the foundation, and you send the email and it comes right to me and my team, and we read it, and we've been getting, it's fahmifoundation.com.
Oh, not online.
Are you not online? All right, then we can.
There's a table, at the back of the room, and some representatives that can perhaps pass your query on for you.
Okay.
So there are some tables back there with information on your way out.
Yeah. But before I leave, please, let's communicate, and we could share our contacts. And in general, we're open to so many ideas, and we want to support and make a difference. So I'd be very happy to communicate. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Christina. My question for you, so you spoke a lot about social media and how important it was to bringing awareness to your story. So my question is, how would your story have played out differently had social media not been around?
Yeah, I got some of the questions.
So she was just asking how you think it would have been, your case would have played out differently if social media had not advocated for your release.
No, I think it would have been a whole different situation, because I just mentioned the numbers. When you have 780 million impressions, in 1 month, that's a lot. And that, again, shows the sort of unprecedented unity we had. So I'm thankful to Al Jazeera for this campaign. As I mentioned, it did, it garnered grassroots support, and it kept it alive, and I think it did make a big difference. But as I mentioned before, I'm not thankful for the negligence and all that. But, again, any situation to anyone across the globe who falls in a situation like that, there should be a parallel strategy. A good social media approach, a good legal team with a proven track record that doesn't turn against you in court, and a good a PR strategy, and the families are very important to get involved because they put a human face, and I think my wife understood that, and it's very, very important to do a combination of all.
It's good to have Amal Clooney too.
Amal Clooney,
if you can get her. Yeah.
Definitely a game changer.
Next question.
Being a student of history and looking at the future of Egypt, when do you see a time where the generals will no longer have so much power in the army? Do you see that in your lifetime?
Gosh, is this on the record?
I'm afraid so.
My dad had written against the Egyptian regime during Mubarak, and he was banned from entering Egypt for 8 years. And then after the revolution succeeded in 2011, there was no system, and he entered Egypt. And as far as I remember, I think it was always run by the generals and the army. And the Muslim Brotherhood, took over. The youth started the revolution, and they did an awesome job. And we were all there witnessing it, and we were loving it, and there was hope for change. But the youth were not as organized, and the Muslim Brotherhood were organized as the most organized group on the ground, and they took over. They won the elections, fair and square. And I do believe that what happened after that, was tough to analyze as a journalist, because we were not getting enough transparency at the time, and we just got threads of information. It was obvious that the Muslim Brotherhood were not very good at what they were doing, and it was all new to them running Egypt, and it was not inclusive, and the military sort of ousted them. And so somebody asked me once before, how much control do you think the military has in terms of the budget in Egypt and all of that? And I would put it, there's no specific figure because nobody will tell you, but I would say a bit over 50%, and they're very engrossed in production of food and military equipment and arms, and they're very involved in stuff they shouldn't be doing, but that's not protecting the borders of Egypt. But so my answer is that I don't see when that could happen, but we had a chance and we had a dream, and now it's a new reality that we live with. And I do believe that there is hope for Egypt. And I do believe that if the government wants to promote this democratic movement and a true democracy, they have to revisit the freedom of expression file and the human rights file and the civil liberties file that is now, questionable. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Ryan Durgee, and I'm going to switch it up a bit, give you a bit more of a fun question. You said that you're going to write a book about your story. I'm wondering, if that book became a screenplay, which leading man would you want to play you?
What's that part? The screenplay, right?
He said, if it becomes a screenplay, who would you like to play you?
Oh.
This is your chance.
George Clooney, I spoke to I spoke to George Clooney. I was speaking to Amal after I was released. We were having the celebratory phone call right after I was released, and he snatched the phone and we had a quick conversation with him. And he was so engaged in the story. I couldn't believe it. He was like, Mohammed, I'd waken up at 5 in the morning in LA to check what's happening on your trial. But he was so deep, which is not a surprise about a man like George Clooney. He was so deep about what it all meant, and he got into the whole geopolitical aspect of it. And I was shocked at how engaged he was, and I was very happy to see that, he was really moved by the story. And a lot of people don't realize what Amal has done in this whole case. She has written part of the annex in the appeal, and she has worked with my wife all the time behind closed doors, and she was lobbying where Al Jazeera wasn't lobbying. She was lobbying with the Egyptian ambassador in Washington and Ottawa and New York, and she was talking to the Egyptian presidency and the prime minister and the foreign ministry, telling them, hey, this guy's innocent, he's a journalist, he protested against the Muslim Brotherhood. How do you put him as a leader, in a ringleader of the Muslim Brotherhood? So I do believe that part of the reason why I'm here today is, these two very powerful women, Marwa and Omara and Amal Clooney, and I'm very thankful to them.
So you owe it to George, basically,
Yeah,
to allow him to play.
Hi, my name is Neta, and actually, before I kind of ask my question, I just wanted to say that I'm very happy that you returned to Canada, but at the same time, I want to say that all the time when I follow up with your news, I was constantly thinking of your wife. So I think I was just very impressed about like her strengths, and also the story that you talked about. You know, she kind of brought the news to you. So I just want to say that as a woman from Middle East, I really understand kind of what you went through, and kind of it's a role model. And just my question is about the course you're gonna teach at UBC. So of course, I mean, I'm jealous of that because we are in Toronto, and I checked online. There is no online course for that. So I'm wondering if you see any possibility to have the online course, or maybe just as a suggestion to have it as a fundraising for the Fahmy Foundation, kind of to have that course so people that are interested, and even maybe in the other part of the world that they want to kind of take it. I don't know if you've thought about it or you can consider that. Thanks.
You just sparked an idea for me. I mean, I am clueless about fundraising and these matters. So, yeah. No, my wife, when we met, she didn't care about politics, you know, and she was suddenly brought into this world of journalists, and it's a very tough world. And I think she realized that later on, and she became a politician, a media personality, and you know, a lawyer. Yeah. And you know, I'm very, very grateful. And you know, she still suffers with me as. But you know, in terms of what teaching and in Vancouver. I haven't thought much about, you know, what I can do in terms of fundraising, but I do believe that I've been invited to several universities across Canada and the US to speak, and I hope I can just share my experiences there, you know, and even go even more in depth about other points. And, you know, there's an aspect of citizen journalism in our case that will need another talk by its own. So I'd love to continue talking and doing more, as you suggested. Thank you.
Thanks. Hi there, my name is Dan. You mentioned some of your experiences with other prisoners during your time there. What I want to know is, what type of conversations did you have with these people over their extremist ideologies, and what was that like?
Yeah, so the conversations about?
Yeah, with the prisoners, that you had access to these incredible prisoners. What kind of conversations did you have specifically about ideology?
Yeah.
Well,
you know, these sort of conversations we had was, for example, that, you know, Egypt has branded, and I don't like talking much about this, and maybe this is the first time I'm going to talk about it. You know, President Sisi has branded the Muslim Brotherhood as terrorists, so did Saudi Arabia, so did the UAE. And, you know, talking to Mohammed al-Zawahri inside, the brother of the Al-Qaeda leader, he explained, and I had a relationship with him as a journalist, and he was a source outside, so there was sort of an open conversation with him. He explained how the Muslim Brotherhood had cooperated with him as a Salafi jihadi when they felt that they were going to be ousted, and that they wanted his support, and in return, he asked that they would apply Sharia law in running Egypt, you know. And at that point, you know, branding them as terrorists, there are people in the Muslim Brotherhood who were obviously involved in terrorism. If you are, you know, working in a secret pact or in a pact with a group that is going to use violence, and it's obviously there's no concrete definition of terrorism across the world. Every country, you know, has now its new definitions for it. You know, there are groups that are being classified as terrorists here and in the US, but not in other places. So it was interesting to learn for the first time that some of the Muslim Brotherhood leaders had made this pact with al-Zawahri, which, means that they were involved in terrorism. But again, there were people inside that were Muslim Brotherhood, but they were young students, and talking to them, it was a revelation that they shouldn't be branded as terrorists. And they were just doing what 19-year-olds do and participating in protests and promoting their cause. And suddenly they're thrown in there. And so this generalization didn't really sit well with me. And that's just one example that I gave you. And gradually I'm talking more and more about what these conversations were about. And this is something, this was an intense conversation. There was also a charter that was written in prison prior to the presidential elections in Egypt. And it was basically a suggestion for reconciliation that was written by the Muslim Brotherhood behind bars. And I spoke to them, I was like, why are you sending it to the US Embassy and the UN if you're proposing it as a reconciliation between the Muslim Brotherhood and the Egyptian government? Maybe it would be a better idea to present it directly to an Egyptian body, considering that the Egyptian government is hypersensitive to what they call international or external meddling in the government's or the country's business. So, and in that reconciliation effort, they had, deleted their previous demand that President Morsi of the Muslim Brotherhood, the former president, returns back to rule the country, but they also didn't want President Sisi to rule the country, and then they wanted a sort of compensation to those who were killed in Rabaa, the pro-Muslim Brotherhood 45-day protest and sit-in that was dispersed very violently. These were things that were happening right there in front of me, and they were very meaningful, and they were very intense conversations. And like I said, this radio show was definitely something that we lived for on a daily basis, and we prepared for it like a TV show. And we would ask them all these questions, and again, it was interesting how these politicians behind bars kept their labels, so you'd have the Minister of Interior is right there, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and they all called themselves, and they kept the titles. And, it was very interesting because, as I was interviewing them from that hatch, and I could see just their eyes and part of their face, they would still speak like they're in Parliament. And you know how politicians are, politicians, they never stop talking. And I would tell them, sir, we are not in the Parliament. So again, it may seem, humor is important behind closed doors, just like in prison, just like it is important sometimes on the front line when you're waiting for 10 hours for something to happen on a border, for example. So, I hope you just, sparked something.
Thank you.
Thanks. And I'm sorry, this will be our last question for tonight.
Mr. Fahmy, my name is Zachary Camp. I just wanted to ask you, as someone who wants to see freedom of expression not only preserved, but advanced over the course of my lifetime, what is it you feel that a young journalist should be doing?
That's a great question to end it on. So just, you heard that?
Champion freedom of expression.
Yeah, as a young journalist, what's the best thing that you can do?
Well, the best thing that you can do is first remember that every single job you do as a beginning journalist, whether it's interpreting or translation or media monitoring, is very important, because the people you're going to meet and work with from day one day you're going to bump into them again 10 years later, and they will vouch for you when you're in prison. So, So
you're basically building your witness roster from day one.
So it's very important to love your job from day one, because I know a lot of journalists want to jump right in from day one and cover the front line. And they also, these young journalists also need to understand that covering the front line and these very intense conflicts that we cover is not an easy job, and you shouldn't just jump in there. It's a really tough job. You are hated by everybody. There is no neutral zone to go anymore. The government wants to get you, the extremists want to get you, and you have nowhere to go. And it's becoming harder and harder. And as a young journalist, you should understand that, again, journalism is a tough job. It's one of the most dangerous jobs in the world, and the numbers is a manifestation to that. So young journalists, again, to champion freedom of expression, there's so many initiatives across the world, and there are so many people now working on charters, and I'm trying to cooperate with others in my suggestions to submit, again, ideas to the UN of what to do and what not. And for every young journalist, I just say that, this experience, if I believed in journalism, I believe in it more than ever, because being on this side of the microphone and the camera just made me realize how important this job is, and how keeping people's stories alive and their plight and what they go through, and having that watchdog approach to, to make sure these presidents and these governments we elect are accountable, this means something. And it's a great job that we do, and we have to continue to champion that cause.
And that's a great...
Ladies and
Can
gentlemen,
I say one thing?
please join me. I don't know if my mic is on. Can you hear me? Michelle, Mohammed, your contribution tonight on behalf of this audience, our audience downstairs, our audience online is substantial. Thank you for your being so candid and great interview.
Thank you. I'd like to say one thing that because today is the International Day against immunity for crimes against journalists, I believe that rule of law should be applied to anyone that kills a journalist. And today, I'd like to mention Canadian-Iranian photojournalist Zahra Kazemi, who was arrested in July 2013, and she was killed behind closed doors in the custody of the Iranian government a month later. And, her skull was fractured, so there's no word, it's obvious what happened. And again, she is someone that was taking photographs outside the Evin prison and trying to tell a story about people in despair, and she had genuine intention. She's Canadian-Iranian, and she has died doing her job. So on this day, on November 2nd, we should remember Ms. Kazemi, and I'm sure her family are going through tough times, and I hope that the case, the Iranian government understands that imprisoning people like Jason Rezaian and killing people like Ms. Kazemi is something that should not be allowed under any circumstance.